Hello and welcome to a new Google Sheets video in Practical Sheets. Today I'm going to show you how to connect Google Forms with Google Sheets using Google Apps Script. And you're going to ask, why should I do that if I could already connect them with just one button? So today I'm going to show you why it's a good idea to connect it manually with your own scripts and what you can do. I'm going to show you very quickly. So here you have the basic connection between sheets and forms. You're bringing your answers, and then you have this timestamp, and then you have all the questions you've ever created, and then you have to stick with the order that Google Forms gives to you. If you do it with Google Apps Sheets, you don't need to do, for example, timestamps. You can remove the timestamp, you can order however you want the questions. You could remove some questions if you want. You could even in the future add some custom fields like consecutive numbers or similar to VLOOKUPs and things like that. For example, if you have the ID of a product or of a customer, then you can do a lookup to search which product matches that ID or which customer matches that customer ID, and much more. So there are various ways of doing this. Today I'm going to show you how to do it using code from Google Sheets. I hope you like it, and if you want to download the template of these and more than 150 videos, you could go to the Patreon page listed down below. If not, welcome to the tutorial, and you could also join more than 200 Patreons that support me day by day, and that without them I couldn't do this. So thank you so much to my patrons. Thank you so much if you're seeing this, and if you're not becoming a patron, just a subscription to the channel helps a lot. Thanks again, and let's begin. So today we're going to talk about connecting forms and sheets, and you might be asking yourself, why do I need to do this manually with Google Apps Script if forms and sheets already have a manual connection, let's say. So let's see this native connection in action first, so I can compare and show you what are the benefits of doing it on your own with your own code. So I'm going to start with a blank Google Sheet. I'm going to Tools, and I'm going to create a new form. With this, I'm doing two things. The first thing is I'm creating a Google form. The second thing is that this Google form is already connected to my sheet through this new sheet called Form Responses. I could call this however I like. Let's say we're going to do RSVPs for an event, whatever. So when I have this sheet with this purple icon, I know that forms and sheets are already connected. Another way to see it is go to Responses and see that I have this button that says View on Sheets. This means that I have already connected my form with my sheet. I can give a name to this, and also here. So this way, with this very easy connection, when I receive a new answer, let's try it here. I haven't created a question, I'm just testing that everything is working. So now I see that automatically it is sending the answers here. Why would you want to connect this through your own code? A couple of things. First, maybe you don't need or you don't want this timestamp. This timestamp comes by default in this native connection. So for me, it's very useful to know the timestamp, but maybe you don't want like that. You don't want the timestamp, or you want it separated from the beginning. You want the date and then the hour, or you want it not as the first column, but as the third one. By default, in this native connection, timestamp will always be the first column. Other thing you may need is a reference number, for example, a consecutive. Let's say we're talking about help desk. Maybe I want to have a consecutive number for each response so that it's easy for me and for the user to track their submission. So I want to have a consecutive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And again, I could put it in the column I want. And thirdly, the other thing I would want is to have calculated fields, not by formulas, but directly from a calculation I do directly on my code, and then I put it here. And the last thing is that I could do the order I want of my questions. Let's say I have 30 questions and I want to have them in the order I want, not necessarily the order of the form. So normally the answers in Google Forms and Google Sheets, when I have this native connection, will come in the order I add them to the form. For example, if I add a new one and I call this name, then I go here, and the name is the third one, not the second one. Maybe I want it to be the second one. And then if I add a new one here, I'm standing here and I add another one that is called email. And the email comes here. And maybe I wanted the email to be the second one. This, I cannot do it. Even if I change the order of the questions, the sheet won't change. Other thing I can do is I could remove this email. And when I remove it, it will be removed from here also, I think. When I remove the email, you can see that here I'm not removing it. Maybe I want the email in settings. I'm going to add the email here by this collect email addresses and responder input. And then I go and I have this email at the beginning. So maybe it's nice to have the email at the beginning, but again, maybe I don't want the email to be at the beginning, but wherever I want it to be. So in other words, I want to have more flexibility and more decision on which type of questions I want and where. Okay? So after this introduction, there are 3 ways of doing this. The first way is through Google Sheets. For example, here, I already have a form connected. If I already have a form connected, then it's easy to access the elements of these forms of this answer. The dark side of this is that I need to leave this connection open. So I'm going to duplicate. I will have the original connection and then I will have to create a new one. The silver lining of this is that, well, you can also think of it as a backup. So I like this idea, but just take into account that you will always need also to have the connection. But if you think of it as a backup and maybe you'll leave it hidden, I think it's a good idea. The other 2 ways involve coding directly from Google Forms. So I go here and script editor and I will create the code from here. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. I like the Sheet one because of 2 reasons. The first one is a selfish one, is that it's easier for some reason to share Google Sheets and everything inside the Google Sheets. And when I send a Google Sheet, I'm also sending the Google form. When a form is connected, as long as I have both with the permission to everyone, then when I share the sheet and you open the sheet, you will copy both files, the sheet and the form, as well as the code. So this is why I like it better, because if you would do it on the Google Forms, then you would have to share separately the Google Sheet. When you're copying, sharing it, I like it better this way. And the other thing is the backup. Think of it as if something happens to your code, you always have the backup of this original connection. But on the other hand, you're having more data. So just think of it. Today we're going to focus on this method with coding in Google Sheets. But if you like, in a separate course, in a separate video, we could do the form way, the way coding in Google Forms. After almost 10 minutes of blabbering, then I can go to the real core of this video. Let's go to extensions, let's go to our script. We're going to create a function and call it import form response. Mandatorily, I need to have this E object because I'm going to have to connect this through a trigger. So more on that in a bit. For now, the only thing I want to do is log this E. Let's save this. And you know what? I'm also going, that's it. Let's go to triggers. And we're going to create a new trigger. We only have one function, so this would do. I'm going to leave this in head. Always you leave it like that. And you're going to leave from spreadsheet. The thing you're going to change is the event type. The event type will be on form submit. Again, this will only work if you already have a form connected to your sheet, as we did at the beginning of the video. Let's click save, and it's going to ask for some permissions. Maybe not that much because I haven't added any service yet. Just the basic permissions. I click in advanced. I go to the last option, go to untitled project, and then allow. It is a good idea to change this untitled project name to connect forms and sheets. Now let's run it one time. The thing is, you cannot run it here. If I try to run it here, I'm going to have this null or worse, an error, depending on what you have. So the only way of running this, and this is very important because this is a very common question, is you need to send a form. So let's go again to tools, let's go to manage form, let's go to live form, and then let's send an answer. To see the log, to see if I had an error, I need to go to the executions. I cannot see it in the execution log. I need to go here and see that I triggered a function and I have it completed. So if I click on that, then I'll have anything I logged there. So I logged an object, and this object, I cannot see inside of it. For this, we're going to go to the reference overview of Google Apps Script. Let's go to Forms. Let's go to Automation, Triggers and Events, and to Event Objects. What we did here, when we created a trigger, we did what is called an installable trigger. The installable triggers may be time-driven or event-driven triggers. The one I did was this installable form submit. Now I need to know what event does this form submit trigger brings. So for this, we go to event objects and let's search for the on form submit inside Google Sheets. Is this one, okay? And I can see that I have 3 possible options. I have name values, I have range, and I have values. Range is whatever sheet brought here. So I could access this row. This is the first way. The second way to access the values is with these name values. It's just an object that has each question by their name. And the third one is values, that it has each answer but by their position. This is very important to differentiate. How do you want to access it? I like this one because I think it's easier to access by the name. But you need to be careful that if you ever change the name of your questions, then the object will change and it may cause some errors. So this is the only caveat you need to take into account. So we're going to use this one. We're going to use name values, and we go to our code and we're going to log e.named values. See what do we have. Let's save it, and again, you cannot, let's try to run it here, and you'll find this error. Again, very common error, cannot read properties of undefined reading name values. If you have this error, one of the main reasons is that you're trying to run it from the editor. You cannot run it from the editor. I cannot stress this enough because it's a very, very common question in the comments. So you need to go here, submit another response. Let's try it again. Let's submit. Let's go here. Apparently it worked fine. And if I go to my executions and to my trigger, now I have an object with 4 elements. The first element is on title question. That is this one. I never gave it a name. The timestamp. You can see that even though there is no question with the timestamp, it will always bring the timestamp automatically if you need it. You may not send it if you want, but you may want to. Then you have the name, in my case, the email address, and it's important to know that each of these comes in an array. It's very important. So now let's go to the important thing here, is how do we send this to a sheet? Now I'm going to send it to a new sheet. Let's call this RSVP Google Apps Script. This is the one we created. This is the original one. This is the one we're going to create. So let's say for now, I don't need a timestamp. I just want, and I could also skip questions if I like. This is a thing I don't have the option in the default connection that we did at the beginning. Let's say for now, we just want the email address and the name. That's it. So I'm going to say email address and name. So I'm going once again to the executions. I'm going to copy this object and I'm going to paste it down here below the code just for reference, and I'm going to enclose it in quotation marks with Alt-Shift-A. And let's give it some zoom. I think you've been struggling with the small font. So now I know that the names of the questions. For now, let's call these ename values. We're going to give it a name, stored in a variable called responses. Now, let's continue logging our responses. And now I'm going to access the individual elements in these responses. So if I want to access any of these, I could do dot, or the one I recommend, given the spaces, the possible special characters starting in uppercase. So you could try with dot, but it's not my recommended way. It's better to do it with a square bracket. And inside quotation marks, it could be double or simple. You're going to include, and let's log this, logger log. And we're going to do the same for the email. Email address, actually. Email address. Let's save. And let's run it again. You already know the drill. You're not going to run it here. Again, if I try to run it, I'm going to have this code.js2 error. Okay. So I'm going to submit a new answer. We can go here and see that the answer was correctly sent to the backup native connection. Now let's go to our executions and see that we didn't have any errors. And let's see. So we have Julia and we have Sebastian, but you can see that it brings it in a square bracket. What does a square bracket mean? It means an array. So this is an array. So I need to take it out of the array. It's very easy. In theory, we're just going to do open bracket 0. This means that we're always going for the first position of the bracket. This may prove a problem when we have questions with multiple answers. The most common one is this one. I'm going to show you quickly. These checkboxes that you can check more than one. Then inside the bracket, you're going to have multiple questions. But this is the subject for another video, because if not, it will be too long. I'm going to remove this untitled question also. I don't need it for now. So what I need to do now is just take this response's name and this response's email address and add it to this sheet. So first, let's connect to this sheet. We haven't connected to Google Sheets yet. So we need to connect first to Google Sheet, then to this RSVP Google Apps Script sheet, and then we're going to append a row. So let's do spreadsheet app dot get active spreadsheet dot get sheet by name. So sorry if I'm going too quick, but basically this spreadsheet app connects with Google Sheets. This get active spreadsheet connects with the active spreadsheet. This one that's called title spreadsheet, let's change the name to connecting forms and sheets through Google Apps Script. And finally, we're going to connect with a specific sheet, that is this one. Okay, our RSVP space GAS. And as a fourth step, we're going to do append row. And append row needs just an array with the number of elements you wish. So we're going to open an array, inside the parentheses. And we're going to put first this response name, first the email. So we're going to put the responses email address, then comma, responses name. The only problem with this, that it may work at the beginning, because a very weird thing happened when I was testing this. It worked the first time and then it never worked again. So the problem with this is that you are trying to put inside the array another array and it won't work. So if we try to run it, let's do our response. Let's do Sarah and submit it. You're going to get an object that's basically an array. So what you need here is to put a square bracket and 0, because again, if you go to email address here, for example, you're taking this, so you need to go to the first object or the first element of email address. Same for name. Again, this will change, and this will we need to do it in a different way when you are talking about different type of questions, such as checkboxes, and you have multiple answers. But for now, for my 80% of questions that will require just one answer, this should work well. Let's save and let's try it again. And now you have it. Okay. You still are having it here, but again, with all the default settings of Sheets, of the native connection of Forms and Sheets. Here you can have it however you want. If you want the name first, it's as easy as changing the name here. Actually, you know what we're going to do? We're going to assign some variables here. So we're going to say that the variable name will be responses name in position 0, and then the variable email will be responses in the marker email address and then in the position 0. So now we can change this just for email, and we can change this for name. It's very easy. Then if you want to have the name first, well, you just change it here. And if you want to add another thing, for example, you're going to add the word yes, and then here we can add another field called submitted. Let's do it again. And here you have it. Now, in order to finish, we're going to add a new question, a drop-down, actually a multiple choice, and we're going to call this event. And let's do 2 events: Google Sheets, seminar, webinar, and Google Forms webinar. Here we will need to add something, so we're going to add here webinar, and the name should be the same name of the question here, in this case event. So event, and here we're going to change this for event. It's called should call it not webinar but event. Okay, let's save it. Let's try it again. So Hannah, any event, let's submit it, and it works perfectly. Let's see if I don't answer anything in the answers that are not mandatory. So let's submit this one without answers. Let's see what happens. So apparently it continues to work. Okay, so I know there are some mistakes, especially when you try out more advanced type of questions. Okay, so just let me know in the comments, and we could do a part 2 when we do maybe try drop downs, try checkboxes to see what is happening. On theory, this should work for these short answer texts and these multiple choice, even the drop downs, without a problem. So just let me know if you're having any trouble with this, and we could in the future add different things. Here we could add, for example, we haven't added the timestamp because we said we didn't want it, but maybe you want the timestamp but just the date, or you want just the hour, or maybe you want a consecutive number or something like that. So just let me know, and we can continue in a part 2. You could even go one step further, and maybe you like how Sheets and Forms have structured these with new tables, so you could just do format, convert to table, and it will work the same. I'm going to leave it green so you differentiate between the native and the one we created, and let's do just one more to see that it works. And if you want to see the advantages of having a table, then there's a video just for that, so you can see why it's a good idea to have a table. So now you have it. And the final thing you can do is just hide this. You cannot delete it because it will damage the rest of your code. So you just hide it. If you don't need it, and again, it's a nice thing to have the backup just in case. If you're having any trouble with your code, then you'll have the backup in the other sheet. Thank you so much, especially my Patreons. Without them, this would not be possible. Thanks a lot, and see you next time where we could advance this and add much more some other calculated fields that you may need. But